If you buy anything made of leather, it's bound to be of good quality, right? Well, not so quick, because it all depends. So what exactly is the issue here? Just like with many things in fashion, the term leather or genuine leather, top grain leather, veg tan leather are often overused and underexplained. So you as a consumer have a hard time knowing what you're actually buying, what's good, what's bad, and what to avoid. Now, this video in no means is meant to be an indictment of leather goods manufacturers, tanneries, and craftsmen. It's really an effort to help you understand what you're buying, so not so much is missing between the processes of leather production and leather goods production and the final product that finds its way to you. So first of all, what do we mean by leather? When we talk about leather, we mean an animal hide or skin that has been tanned and then dyed. Despite the simplistic definition of leather, the variations of qualities are endless. It's almost like saying food. It is a product type, but there's a big difference between fish sticks and caviar. The final leather that is used in production is greatly influenced by the animal it came from, the tanner who tanned it and dyed it, but also the way it was finished and handled with oils and waxes. Of course, the workmanship of the leather goods, but we could make an entire video just about that. So this is just about the leather, not about the workmanship. Another hugely important aspect of leather, which is often not mentioned when you buy the leather products, is what part of the skin or hide did this leather come from. So in order for you to understand the differences between high quality, average quality, and low quality leather, we first have to take a look at the leather basics. Leather is made of the skin of an animal, but at the top of the skin usually there's hair and the epidermis, which are skin cells that are typically both removed at the early stages of the tanning process. With the hair and epidermis removed, you basically have three different areas of the skin or the hide. On top, you have the grain, which are basically tight collagen bundles. At the bottom, you have the corium, which are large collagen bundles. And then in between, you have the grain corium junction, which are collagen bundles that are somewhat in between the grain and the corium. Below the corium is the flesh side, but during the tanning process in the early stages, all flesh is completely removed. So when you have that skin of a bull before tanning, it can be between 9 and 10 millimeters thick, which is about 2/5 of an inch. Now, because that hide is so thick, it can actually be cut apart. This is also known as splitting. That means one hide of about 5 square meters or 50 square feet can yield 100 square feet or 10 square meters of leather. The highest quality part of the leather is the grain on top. So you might think, well, top grain is the best you can get, right? Well, not quite. Basically, the top grain can be separated into two different categories: the full grain and the corrected grain. Looking at the skin layers again, the full grain is basically the grain and maybe sometimes with a bit part of the grain corium junction. The corrected grain is the leather from the grain corium junction and maybe a little bit of the corium. As you can see, the corrected grain layer comes from an area that is not the top of the grain. Because of that, it is a split leather. So typically the top of the corrected grain leather is either sanded or buffed or embossed or pigmented. To make it even more confusing, some people refer to this part also as the top grain. The corium part of the skin is later usually advertised as genuine leather or suede or nubuck leather. You can also make suede out of a full grain leather, but typically most suede leathers are part of the corium that is then sanded or treated in a certain way to give it this suede-like velvety texture. Now, if we just look at the full grain leather, it can be subdivided into aniline and semi-aniline leather. There's also a subvariant, the so-called pull-up aniline leather. Now, all of these are generally high-quality leathers. But what exactly do these aniline terms mean? Once the hide is tanned, it is then ready for dyeing. In order to dye the tanned hides, they usually are put into drums. And then the dye is added in the drum, they rotate, and then at the end you have the tanned and dyed leather. Of course, there are many steps in between, but that's just to simplify things. Aniline dyed means dyed all the way through the leather, which typically means if you look at the leather, there is a color all the way through the leather from the top to the bottom side. Aniline dye is a translucent water-soluble dye without any unsoluble pigments. So the aniline dyeing process brings out all the marks, the grain patterns, and even the imperfections of the leather surface. On the other hand, semi-aniline dye is basically like a regular aniline dye plus a certain amount of non-soluble pigments. Think of it as a kind of top coat. Because it's semi-aniline dyed, the leather still shows the natural grain structure of the leather and imperfections, such as wrinkles or scars. At the same time, it adds certain properties to the leather. Often it can be a better color consistency, or it can be scratch resistancy, or water resistancy. Now also you can add other things that, for example, make leather touchscreen sensitive. Now keep in mind that if the leather is truly semi-aniline dyed, it will always absorb moisture to a certain degree. It may not be as quick as aniline dyed leather, but eventually it will soak in and you can see it in the leather. Last but not least, there is pull-up aniline leather, which is basically aniline leather that is then finished with layers of oils and wax on top. For example, the Monte Cristo, Dumont, and Americana leathers that we use at Fort Belvedere all fall in that pull-up aniline dyed category. Keep in mind, no matter if you get an aniline dyed leather or a semi-aniline dyed leather, typically these are high quality products. Yes, some aniline leathers may feel different than others, and not all tanneries produce the same quality level, but in general, it's a high quality mark. And then of course, there's personal preference. A pull-up aniline leather will have this beautiful pull-up effect where as you bend the leather, it gets lighter, sometimes also darker. It will develop a nice patina over time, and scratches are typically visibly immediately, but they also buff out over time as you use them. Aniline leather is very similar. It doesn't have the pull-up effect. It has the natural grain pattern. The color is mostly consistent, and it develops a nice patina, but you won't see scratches as easily. Then there's a semi-aniline leather. It won't develop as nice of a patina, if any at all, but it has different properties, right? It can be scratch resistant out of the box, and you get that beautiful color consistency, but still a natural grain. So it all depends on what you're interested in and what a nice leather is in your mind. Now let's move on from the cream of the crop of leathers to the corrected grain. Again, this is the split underside, and so typically corrected grain leathers will always be less expensive than full grain leathers. Because the leather is split, the top of the surface has to be treated in some way so it resembles a full grain leather. If you want a smooth leather, typically the leather is pigmented, which means you add a layer of color and PU on top. So what you actually touch with the leather is an artificial coating, not the actual skin or hide. Usually a grain-like pattern is embossed on top of it, so at first glance it may seem very similar to a full grain leather, but it's all artificial. And because of that, you typically don't see any imperfections. Aniline dyed leathers and pull-up aniline dyed leathers really get better with age. They create a patina, they show scratches, they get darker in areas, the scratches buff out, and every day you wear it, the more you will enjoy your product. Now, with pigmented leather, it's the opposite. The day you get the leather, it is as good as it will ever get, and then as you use it, it will just get worse and go downhill from there. Because of that, at Fort Belvedere, we only get full grain leathers that are either aniline dyed, pull-up aniline dyed, or semi-aniline dyed. We skip the entire pigmented range because the only reason to use them is for economical reasons, never for quality. That being said, probably 80 to 90% of all the leather out there is pigmented leather that is heavily coated. most nubuck or suede also comes from the split leather that is then tanned, sanded, and dried. Now, with higher heat, you can create a denser collagen fiber structure, but in order to get a quality split suede, a lot of experience and know-how goes into it. And that's why there is certain manufacturers that specialize in split suede, and their qualities are better than those from others. Of course, you can also make a suede leather from a full-grain skin or hide, but typically that's not done because it is a lot more expensive than a split suede. So most importantly, what should you be looking out for when you're in the market for high-quality leather goods? I would say look for the words full-grain or uncorrected leather. Look for aniline dyed leather or semi-aniline dyed leather. When it comes to suede or nubuck, understand that most likely you are getting a split suede unless it's specifically mentioned that it's not a split suede. When something says it is genuine leather, you really get just a part of the corium. It's the lowest quality of a split leather, and it really is not a high quality leather. Even though you might think, oh, genuine leather sounds nice, I would always stay clear of that. If it says vegan leather, then it's not leather after all. And if you want to learn more about it, as well as the environmental impact of vegan leather, I suggest you check out our video about it here. So does the quality of the leather depend on the animal? Yes, it absolutely does. Now, it all starts with the properties that you want to have. For example, if you want a pair of gloves, then you want a leather that is very flexible and stretchy. Think of peccary or lamb nappa. As you move your hand, you want the leather to contract and extract so it feels like a second skin and there's no resistance. So let's say you were to use a really high quality, expensive, full grain, aniline dyed box calf leather. It would be terrible for a pair of gloves because it's way too stiff and it doesn't have the flexibility that you want for the glove. On the flip side, if you use a very nice to the touch, soft lamb nappa leather for your shoe soles or for a wallet, which is used and put into a pocket very often, it's just a bad choice because even though the leather is soft and nice to the touch, it just won't last very long. Now, the type of animal skin that is used can also have a huge impact on the cost. For example, peccary leather can cost 20 times as much as lamb nappa leather, for example. But even then, not all peccary leather is alike. It usually depends on the tannery it comes from. Generally, you can say that a calf skin is always more expensive than a cowhide or a bull hide. Why? Well, the calf is a much younger, smaller animal, and it yields a different leather. Now, even for calf skin, there are differences. It depends on if it was a calf that only consumed milk, or if it was a calf that also started to eat grass. Generally, the younger, smaller calf is more expensive than the calf that is slightly bigger. At the same time, you can call both of them legally calf skin. Now, as a consumer, it's almost impossible to find out those details because that's not what a manufacturer will advertise. Now, even when it comes to things like bull hide or cowhide, not all hides are equal. For example, if you have the leather from a cow, it will have more wrinkles and creases than that of a bull. This is especially true if the cow has already given birth. That usually means the leather quality will be inferior because there are more wrinkles, it's more stretched out. It doesn't have this nice, tight collagen bundle. Also, cows that were maybe raised in mountain pastures will have fewer buck bites, and if they grew more slowly, the leather quality will be different than if you take a hide from a commercially grain-fed cow that was maybe in South Africa and is full of buck bites. And then, of course, the tanning matters a lot, especially the quality of the tanning. In related questions you might ask, does it matter where the leather is from? And the answer is yes and no. Countries like Italy, Germany, France, or England have centuries of experience in tanning leather, but they also have that experience in Morocco or other parts of the world. So does it mean that all tanneries in Asia, Central America, and South America are bad? No, absolutely not. Over the years, I've found that European tanneries often specialize more on the top end of the market, versus leathers from other continents is often more attractive because of its lower price. If you want to dive deeper into that topic, we have a video on whether made in matters or not. For example, for our Fort Belvedere Peccary gloves, we originally had them tanned in Peru because the raw skins came from Peru. So the idea was tanning them as quickly as possible right where they're at yields a higher quality product. Well, over time we realized there were inconsistencies in the color output and in the softness of the leather. We then started shipping our Peccary skins to a specialized tanner in Germany, and they did a beautiful job. The colors are consistent, not just within the batch, but also from one batch to the other. And all the leather is always soft and really nice to use. So the quality of the tanning can make a huge difference. And again, if there is expertise that has been built over centuries, that can certainly help. So obviously the German tannery had much more expertise and know-how in tanning this particular leather. This is also a reason that most tanneries specialize in a certain thing and are not a jack of all trades. Some really specialized in vetch tan, cowhide, or bullhide. Others are known for their suede. Others focus just on lamb nappa and other glove leathers. Others will do maybe just calf leathers. And if they have the smaller machinery, they couldn't even work on cowhides. In recent years, the idea of vetch tan leathers has become much more popular. And often vetch tan leathers can be burnished, they develop a nice patina, and so it has become synonymous with a higher quality leather, versus chrome tanned leather are often used as an inferior type of leather. Now, there is definitely really high quality chrome tanned leathers and not so great vetch tan leathers. And to learn more about that, we did a video comparing vetch tan and chrome tanned leathers. Also, one thing that is often not discussed with retailers or brands is what part of the hide or skin were these leather goods cut from? Why would it matter from what part a leather good is cut? Well, it's because leather is a natural material. On an alligator hide, it's a lot more obvious, because if you cut something from the center, on the area of the umbilical cord, you just have different scales. If you go more towards the tail, it becomes very scaly, and on a shoe, for example, it's not ideal anymore because the leather won't age very well. But even in a bull hide or cow hide, for example, there's certain areas that are much inferior to others. If you look at a cowhide, for example, you have the belly area on the sides, and you have the neck and shoulders on the top, and then the best piece is known as the croupon. You can also see it being referred to as the double croupon, which is when basically the spinal area hasn't been cut. If you make leather couches, typically they leave their hides intact. If you make smaller leather goods, they will cut it along the spine. Why? Because the spine area itself is often not the best, but the things next to it on the croupon are the top quality leather you can get on that hide. Bespoke shoemakers sometimes even go so far to only cut a single shoe from one area of the croupon which they deem best. And then the rest will be scrap leather, or they'll go to other manufacturers which are fine with that level of quality. Now, if you don't mind lots of wrinkles and creases, the neck and shoulder area leather might be good for you. Versus the belly ends can be very stretchy, and I wouldn't use them for anything. Also, sometimes it depends on what kind of leather goods you want to produce. For example, if you want to produce belts in various lengths and you don't mind the wrinkles and creases, the neck is actually ideal because you have very little waste and you get leather at a lower cost per square foot or square meter. So you can produce something that's very economical, that doesn't produce a lot of waste. On the flip side, if you want to cut belts that are all the same length, you're better off using the croupon, and you'll have the side effect that there are no creases. But of course, the leather will also cost more per square foot or square meter. At Fort Belvedere, we cut our leather goods from the croupon. because we don't want creases typically. Maybe if we wanted a belt that was more casual and we wanted these creases to underline the casualness of it, I could see us going in that direction. But typically we only cut from the coupon versus other brands don't always do that. So why am I telling you all this? Because it makes a difference in the price and the perception of the product. So often when you watch or read a review, people go on about the Tuscan leather that is veg-tanned, aniline dyed from the small Italian tannery approved by the consortio, yada, yada, yada. But I don't even talk about where the leather was cut from. For example, look at the brand Sutherland page and their Weekender. They're very transparent on their product page about their leather. They say veg-tanned from Italy, dyed through, which means aniline dyed. They also say what area it comes from and that it's from a certified consortio tannery in Italy. They also say that they only use French shoulders and that those have characteristic wrinkles. Now, it's not just the French shoulders that have wrinkles and creases, it's all the cowhide and bullhide shoulders and necks. And this is not something that they have to actually do to the leather, that comes naturally with the leather. But when you compare their products to maybe someone else who also sells veg-tanned leather Weekenders, the other may be a lot more expensive and you may not know why. Well, this is the reason why. If the one company cuts everything from the coupon and the other cuts something from the neck, yeah, here you get the creases, here you don't. Then you have to ask yourself, do you want leathers with wrinkles or creases, or do you not? That is a personal preference. If you like that more casual, wrinkly look, then by all means, get the leather from the neck and shoulders. Personally, if I would invest money in a Weekender, I would want something cut from the coupon so I get the best quality leather that looks nice. The same is true for leather from the belly area. Something can be veg-tanned from a very reputable tannery, but if your good is made from the belly part of the leather, it is just not as good as the coupon. How will you notice that? It will probably be softer, it won't keep its shape as well, and over time it won't age quite as well. And then of course there's certain leathers like cordovan leather, which are always from the shell part of the horse. So they can't come from any other part. Because of that, it's also impossible to have a large golf bag made out of one piece of cordovan. Or likewise, you can't make a cordovan belt out of one piece of cordovan leather. If you take a closer look, there are always multiple pieces of cordovan stitched together because the cordovan area is just the buttocks of the horse, basically, and it's just a small area. Another thing to keep in mind about leather is that just because it is a natural animal-derived product doesn't make it automatically green. Historically, tanning and dyeing has always been a dirty craft. And even today, it can still be quite dirty and it requires chemicals. Because of that, much of the world's leather production has been moved to countries with lower environmental and safety standards, which of course makes it less expensive to produce that leather. For example, the sacred Ganges River in India has been heavily polluted because of leather production. That being said, not all tanneries are bad. I've seen some tanneries in Germany that had really refined wastewater systems and very stringent regulations. From my experience, the German regulations are even stricter than, for example, in well-known leather countries like Italy. So understanding where something was tanned, under what conditions, maybe it was certified in a certain way, can also help leather be less impactful on the environment. So when you buy leather next time, ask them if they can tell you something about their environmental certifications or if they have no clue about them. Now, you might also think, well, why should I care about all of this? Can't I just go out and buy something really expensive? Then I know I'll get a quality product. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Yes, one might assume that a higher price will correlate with a higher quality good, but often we found, especially with high-end brands, they rely heavily on the brand name and try to continuously cut corners on the quality. If you generally want to learn what items are worth your money or not, check out our Is It Worth It series. So rather than relying on a brand name, I hope you can actually use the things you learned in this video and find a better leather product for yourself. Of course, leather is a physical thing, and I always find it's a very haptic experience. Touching it, feeling it, bending it will really help you understand what you like and what you dislike. Sadly, that's not something I can purvey over a video. For example, on a recent business trip to Europe, we visited a belt manufacturer, and after we had talked, I stopped by their factory store, and inside it was cool to see they had belts from various decades, and I just walked through and touched each one of them, and I could immediately spot their higher-end calfskin belts, which were originally more expensive than their cowhide belts. But that was because I had already had all this experience. Just by looking and touching the leather, I could tell if it was aniline dyed, semi-aniline dyed, or pigmented or corrected. Becoming a leather expert takes a lot more than watching some videos, but it's just like your style journey. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a process, but it's enjoyable, and what you learn will stay with you for life. Did you learn anything new in this video that you didn't know before? Please share with us in the comments. Today I'm wearing a tweedy jacket from McKinnon, Scotland. It has patch pockets. It is a brown Prince of Wales check with a red overplaid. I'm pairing it with a cream custom shirt with a navy red and cream silk tie from Brooks Brothers, as well as a wool silk pocket square in red and blue from Fort Belvedere. My pants are a nice red pair of Stancliffe corduroy trousers, also from Fort Belvedere, and you can see I'm coordinating the color red in the jacket and the pocket square and the tie and in the pants, thus tying it all together. My socks are Lycos from Fort Belvedere, they're shadow striped in gray and red. Now my shoes are from Paul Stewart. They're in a nice kind of cognac brown aniline dyed leather that has been embossed with a grain. They're like a penny loafer with some kilties without the tassel, which I thought was interesting. My belt matches the color of my shoes. It also has an embossed pattern on a aniline dyed calfskin, which I found at the outlet at the belt manufacturer. My wallet is a bifold wallet with 10 card slots made in our Dumont leather in saddle brown. I'm particularly proud of it because it truly has a lot of leather even in all the dividers, and because of that it takes about 3 times as much leather as a regular wallet. The Dumont leather is very special. It's fully aniline dyed. It is finished with oils and waxes to get that nice pull-up effect, but it's also tumbled to get kind of a grainy look, but still with a smooth texture on top. My pinky ring has a blue star sapphire, and it's silver to match my belt buckle. With my tweed jacket, I'm going with the Greed Irish Tweed cologne from Creed.